Welcome to the Superintendent's Hangout, where we discuss topics in education, charter schools, life in general, and not necessarily in that order. I'm your host, Dr. Sciarretta. Come on in and hang out. In this episode, I meet with attorney Todd and we discuss charter schools, nonprofit boards, sunshine laws such as the Brown Act in California, and we also try to peer into the future of education in the United States and globally. We also talk a little bit about fishing. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome, Todd, to the Superintendent's Hangout. Thanks for joining me today.
No, I appreciate it. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. If you can start out by just letting our listeners know kind of who you are and what brings you to this point, and maybe along the way, kind of the journey that led the two of us to get to meet each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. So Todd Plate, I'm an attorney. I've been working with charter schools like Einstein for, it's been going on 15 years at this point. And it's been an interesting journey. Right out of law school, I worked with a firm that worked with the CSU and UC systems, and went from there to a district side law firm. And then after a few years, I realized that, charter schools are a really interesting idea, combination of public-private, loved the entrepreneurial spirit about it. And so it really drew me towards the charter school community. And then, along the way, you and I got connected up, and I love what Einstein is. I love what they do. I love the kind of the history and the growth, and super excited about the high school coming up.
Yeah, it's a interesting time in the life of Albert Einstein Academies, and just for the listeners, Todd's also on our high school working group, so working on the curricular programming of our upcoming high school. So going back to, let's go back pre law school. Where are you from?
So born in Minnesota, lived in Chicago for a while. Really came down to San Diego in high school, and didn't really know what I wanted to do, and figured stuff out in college, and was drawn to history, poli-sci, government, and as part of that was the law and the legal community. And in the early 90s, when I graduated the history degree, basically you taught or you went to law school, and it was really almost talked to us as an MBA for liberal arts majors. But I was already interested in government, and so for me, law school was a great kind of next step. I took a few years off and did some odd jobs after college, just figuring stuff out, but then moved up to San Francisco, went to law school, and off to the races.
So it's interesting, was education law your focus going in, something you're interested in going into law school, or did it evolve organically, or how did that work? Because right now you own your own firm, but right. I think you worked for other firms prior.
Yeah. Going into law school, I don't know that I had a specific idea about education. I knew I enjoyed some of the legal issues surrounding education, but I actually, during law school, I worked with a federal judge down here in San Diego, and her husband was a partner in a firm, and there was an office for that firm in San Francisco, and I got connected with those guys, and they were doing employment law, and it was a boutique firm, and just doing employment law, but as part of that, they were doing community colleges, UC and CSU systems, and that part really intrigued me because you've got all the union issues and collective bargaining and just a lot of really interesting public law focus that as soon as I kind of got into the legal world, that started to draw my attention.
And then, so yeah, it's interesting to reflect on, because what year are we talking about? Did you graduate? Let's see. Charter law predates your graduation from
undergrad.
I don't want to let people know how old you are, so I can tell you that I'm old. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes, Dr. Sciarretta and I share similar backgrounds and age-wise.
If we play Trivial Pursuit,
That's
we got to
right.
be on the same team, because
That's
we're going
right.
to do 70s and 80s rock, pop culture.
100%.
Yeah.
So the Charter Schools Act came out right about the time I graduated undergrad, and was a non-existent law for the most part for many years. I was after I graduated law school, I went to work with this employment firm. We did college-related law. I then went to work for a district-side firm. So we represented Oakland Unified, San Francisco Unified, Sacramento Unified. And it was at that time, this was in the early 2000s, the Charter School Law, or the Charter School Act, was really starting to take hold, and it was starting to grow. And it was at that time that I read it, because Sacramento Unified was dealing with the charter school issue. And it was the first time I read the Charter Schools Act, and it was fascinating. It was just, there still wasn't a ton of law out there on what these schools were doing, because the growth was just starting to happen. And so, but that's really what kind of intrigued me, was that one case that we were working with the district with this charter school, and we were trying to figure out this win-win. And that was the first time I kind of got into it and was like, wow, this is fascinating.
So you actually got into it from the authorizer side.
That's exactly right. And they were initially, it was an issue of, do we try and shut them down? But it turned into more of a, how do we work together to figure this out? This was pre all the fights that are going on today, obviously. But it turned around for me, because I liked the entrepreneurial spirit of charter schools, the autonomy, the ability to do something different. That was just really interesting to me.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about the Charter Schools Act, and kind of how things have evolved. So, we've both been around it a long time. I think I started teaching a year or two after that the charters became a thing in California. And I didn't really fully appreciate how different it was, because I had never taught in any other setting. And then over the intervening almost 30 years, we've seen the restrictions, the requirements, the public sentiment, everything change and evolve. So maybe you can kind of take us back to the original intent of the law, and then what you've seen through your career from the legal lens.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It started out with if you look at the California Education Code, it is a mind-numbing document that you go to one section, you could find another section that it would argue against the one statute. Like, there's all of this convoluted language in the Ed Code. And the Charter Schools Act originally, part of the goal of it was to kind of cut through all of that and to say you could start this small. The goal was to be either these urban or rural schools that were underperforming, creating a scenario where you could have a different, something a little different for basically a failing school, and it cut through a lot of the red tape. So there's what they call the mega waiver that basically says a charter school doesn't have to follow all of the different Ed Code provisions. Now, there's obviously limitations to that, but because of that, it allowed for all kinds of flexibility and freedom. And the other part of that is simply that you've got what is now common. It wasn't quite as common, I don't think, in the early days, but you basically have a nonprofit corporation that is running a public school. And so you've got this crossover of nonprofit corporation code ideas with education code, and it's a fascinating idea. So throughout the 90s, what you had these new kind of models. This how do we try something new? How do we try to do something different? Obviously, Einstein with the International Baccalaureate program, like that's not something you generally see in traditional education settings, and that's a wonderful example of what the purpose of the Charter Schools Act was supposed to be about. And so early on, it was great, but it was also small enough that it probably was under the radar of what has now become a lot of the detractors of charter schools, between, obviously unions and different organizations that are trying to maybe not shut them down, but control them a little bit more. Initially, it was a wonderfully freeing law that just gave charter schools the ability to go do something different.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance, because I remember in the beginning, I started teaching. I had a bachelor's degree, but I didn't have a credential in the early 90s, and that wasn't a requirement. Each entity got to set their own requirements, and then eventually things changed at the state level and went back and got the credentialing piece and moved through that. And it's always that delicate balance between being so Wild Westy that other people look at the charter and they go, you guys aren't even really educators, because you don't have to do anything, any of the stuff we do. You're not accountable. You don't have state testing. You don't have credentialing, all this. And obviously those things aren't true, right? We're subject to all of in California, at least, we're subject to all of the academic accountability, the health and safety. So those are areas where the mega waiver, certainly the health and safety, that applies to all charters. But it's interesting to reflect on as you say, kind of the petri dish approach in the beginning, where it was like, this is just supposed to be a place where we can cultivate something new. And now statewide, we've got, I think, around 700,000 students in charter schools in California.
Right.
We have more kids in charter schools than many other states have total inhabitants.
Right.
North Dakota, that's a shout out. And so how do we keep it innovative and new when it's that big? And it's one of the things I wrestle with. I think that you could probably parachute into a lot of charter school classrooms around the state of California. And if there were no logos or anything on the wall, you probably wouldn't know if it was a charter or a traditional public school.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we have all these forces that are pushing us back to conformity.
Yeah.
And then hopefully our parent communities understand the difference, but they often don't.
Right.
They just look for a place that's safe and their kids are happy and they're learning.
Yeah.
Have you ever worked with a charter organization that was unionized?
No, I haven't. We worked with an organization in the Northern California that was in the process of going through that, but it wound up not being successful. But I have not worked directly with an organization that has a union presence.
Yeah, it's interesting because we have a couple examples here in San Diego, and I know in LA, the Green Dot schools, some of them were converted to charters while they had the union in place. And I can't remember the data, but some percentage of charters around the country are unionized. I don't know, it's 10 or 15% or something. Yeah, depending on the state. And it'd be an interesting. Yet one more layer, right? Imagine you have a nonprofit supported by public funds, also unionized.
Yeah.
So
you've got who is an employee, a public employee or a private employee? Are they covered under collective bargaining agreement? Are they covered under, like, there's so many different pieces and layers that it gets convoluted quickly in those areas.
Do you? What special challenges have you seen your client schools facing in the last, well, certainly coming out of COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the big areas it has been and continues to be is issues of special education. It's an area that it was a bit of a farce, but there was a lot of talk that charter schools aren't serving all students and serving students with disabilities, and it was a great soundbite against charters. But the reality is charter schools across the state have consistently served students with needs, special needs, and have done so again in a different way, with fully including students into classrooms and and providing resources that are not technically traditional, but seeing wonderful growth. But it continues to be a knock. And coming out of COVID, with schools being shut down, and how do you, and this is true across the board with districts as well, but really with charter schools, I think they got a bit of a bad rap, because you're trying to serve a population when everybody's at home. And that just has been a challenge as all students try and make up learning deficits over the last couple of years, and how much more so that has been true with students with special needs. And that's been definitely a big area for charters.
Yeah, we're looking at the data coming out of, for our organization, but statewide in California and then across the nation, and we're really seeing a big. So there was an achievement gap prior. Sure. But it's almost like that chasm has grown.
Yeah.
And it's almost like one group continues to move forward, and in some cases might have even moved forward faster in remote learning than they were in person.
Yeah.
And others were standing still or walking backwards.
Yeah.
And special education is certainly layered on top of that as well. It's one of the things we're really looking at Einstein going forward, is how to thoughtfully address those gaps that have gotten wider, and it's complex, right? But there's absolutely a socioeconomic piece to it, English language learner piece to it, special education.
Yeah.
And when you get all three of those in one,
right,
the challenges are significant.
Yeah, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but there was a study that came out through Harvard in the last 12 months. They were talking about the dollars that were going to be lost, kind of lifetime earning dollars for especially students on third grade and under, because of loss of ability to growth in reading and basics of English and math, and it was in the trillions of dollars of lifetime earnings that they're projecting that will be lost by these students. So to watch Einstein, put together like the career path and the diploma path with the high school, those kids are going to have a better chance to recoup those kind of dollars when they get through a program like that at Einstein than they would in most regular settings, because they're going to have opportunities for internships and real world hands-on experience that just most kids don't get.
Yeah, I think it's for so long it had been taboo to even talk about the concept that not every student's going to go to college.
Sure.
But now we're seeing career technical programs,
right?
Making a resurgence. There's a lot of money behind planning grants and the like for that. And we're really at Einstein trying to balance the rigor of the IB diploma program and the fact that we want every child to have the opportunity to get an IB diploma.
Sure.
If they're not going to go for the diploma, at least to be able to take really rigorous diploma program classes, but then also to have some practical skills. It's interesting. My daughter attended a charter school for high school, and one of her favorite classes was like a financial planning, a finance class.
Oh, yeah. Great.
And of all the, and she's a very academic student, actually like you, history and political science and the like. But when she reflects back on high school, that was one of her favorite classes. It's a class that it was theoretical enough for her, but it was also practical enough.
Yeah.
And the other day, when she was home from break, we were talking, and we were talking about, I think it was the cost of cars or something. And she said, we learned that in a certain economy, it's better to pay cash for your car, and in another economy, it's better to finance it. And we're talking about interest rates and all those pieces. And the tricky thing is, I think we live in a society that is still largely financially illiterate or semi-literate.
Yeah, agreed.
And so, those practical skills, feel like if we can have those and similar skills, kids can get out and be able to navigate the world in much more productively.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting. Let's see. I'm going to kind of bounce around here a little bit. What do you think is you talked about some of the benefits of charter schools, the entrepreneurial spirit, although we've seen a lot of that being clipped and clawed back by states and districts and county offices of education over the years, and public sentiment, depending on what state you're in. But we talk about the positive sides. Now, what do you think is one of the greatest challenges facing charter schools for, let's say, the next 30 years of their lives? Because we're 30 years old now. So where are we going to be when we're 60?
Yeah, it's that's a good question. I think that it has obviously moved into a mature movement, right? The growing pains piece, all the things you just talked about, kind of the clipping of the wings has taken place, and there's a bit of a finding our place in the education world. The challenge, I think, is going to be a couple things. It's going to be, you pointed out how you could walk into a charter school and if you didn't know it, a lot of them could look like a district school. How do you keep that different? How do you keep that fresh? Because then there's no real purpose of it. If you're going to be right next to a district school and you're both exactly doing the same thing, that doesn't make sense. So it's going to be the ability to continue to keep ideas new, fresh, grow with a growing population, change with the changing population. That's going to be big, but that's going to be a huge challenge, especially as you see just financially, a lot of can charter schools continue to be completely viable, fiscally viable, while they're trying to do all of these things, as the laws are starting to make things, if you have a financial impact on your authorizer, can they claw that back? Can they, you've got problems with facilities, has always been an issue, and in proper size facilities, and is that going to be a constant battle going into the next 10, 20 years? That's going to be huge. I think the other part simply is there needs to be a next generation of charter leaders that are looking to move this forward. Like in the last, the first 10 years, there was growing pains and it was a little bit of success. And then really the next 10, 15 years, you really started to see the momentum. And as you said, 700,000 students, 1,300, whatever, charter schools in California, plus Colorado and Louisiana and everywhere else. There's been this great growing movement, but is it going to stall? Because a movement like the charter school movement, at least in my opinion, it needs people who are striving to do something different, not just go in, collect a paycheck, do your 30 years and retire. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not going to be what the next 30 years look like if there's not good, solid leadership running that.
Yeah, it's I think about that a lot, the next generation of charter leaders. My grandmother always talked about lifters. She always used to say, in life there are lifters and leaners.
Oh,
And you got to figure out who's a lifter and who's a leaner.
Yeah.
And ideally everyone's a lifter, but then if everybody's lifting, you've got to coordinate all the lifting. Otherwise that has its own problems. You certainly can't have everybody leaning.
Yeah.
But the concept of showing up for 30 years, collecting your paycheck, and not really having deep buy-in to what you do is definitely a leaning behavior. I don't think that charters can survive with too much of that. Yeah. It's interesting to reflect as well on the fact that while we often espouse innovative, different new strategies and approaches and structures, most of the charter schools that I see, and I read a lot of charter school documents related to my role as a WASC accreditation commissioner as well. Sure. But you read traditional district schools and they have MTSS, multiple tiers of support for students.
Right.
And the charters have MTSS. Right. And the traditional schools have restorative practices for student behavior, and the charter schools have restorative practices for student behavior. And you can really put the two next to each other on paper and they don't look any different.
Right. And
I think some of that has to do with the fact that you can be innovative in your design. It's kind of like that movement of, I think it was in the 60s, sounds like a 60s thing, but schools without walls, right? It was supposed to be like no walls.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the teachers hadn't gone to schools with no walls themselves. And so until we get to the point where schools of education at the university level really deeply understand what a charter school is, we're going to keep churning out teachers who have been prepared at the university level to teach in a way that is feeding into a pretty ossified, calcified system that is, hasn't really changed that much for the last 100 years.
Right.
In terms of structures. A cynic friend of mine, who I'm not going to name on here, but if he listens, he'll know who I'm talking about. He calls it 30 kids in a cell with a bell.
Oh,
that golly. Structure, right?
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, it hasn't really shifted.
Yeah.
There are attempts, there's some movement, but you keep coming back to that. And I was reflecting the other day, and this isn't a criticism, but when we did our middle school building project, and for listeners who don't know or might not be part of the Einstein community, in 2013, we purchased an old hospital, gutted it, and remade it into a really beautiful
it's fabulous
middle school building. It feels like a boutique hotel when you walk in.
It does.
And my vision in that was that our students deserve to have a beautiful, aesthetically pleasing setting in which to learn, the same as you're not going to go on vacation to an ugly hotel if you can go to one that's aesthetically pleasing.
Sure, absolutely.
And I had this vision that we would be very thoughtful about what was put on the walls. And this is not a criticism of the middle school staff. I mean, we've had multiple iterations of teachers there. So this is just kind of, I think, representative of the fact that people do things the way they saw them done when they were in school.
Right, yeah.
Teachers were supposed to have a border around their bulletin board that had little scalloped edges on it.
Did.
And they had to staple it up there, and so they did it. Or they were supposed to have pictures of the dog by their desk, so they did it, or whatever it is. And so I remember going into the building in the beginning and going, wow, this is really beautiful, because there's not a ton of stuff on the walls.
Yeah.
Like, you'd never decorate your house. Well, most people are not going to decorate their house the way that most of our classrooms are.
Sure, right.
Like, you're not going to fill every square inch of wall space and sometimes stuff hanging from the ceiling in your house.
Yeah.
Unless you have some issues around orderliness.
Yeah.
But we do that in our schools. and we don't even question it. And it's because that's kind of how things have been done.
Yeah.
And we walk kids in lines because that's how things have been done. And we've got this, we need to have order. And I understand safety, health and safety is a thing. But the kind of the factory model, and I'm certainly not the first one to say this, so I'm just stealing ideas from people who know more than I do, but that factory model coming out of the 19th century is still really alive and well in our schools.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting reflection point. High Tech High. Have you done work with High Tech High?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I respect most about them is that they have a graduate school of education. And so they actually have a state accredited credentialing program for teachers and for administrators.
Well, maybe this is a question for you. So coming out of COVID, one of the things that COVID forced, especially in the legal community, is a movement into the kind of the 21st century, whether kicking and screaming or not. You don't go to courtrooms anymore. Everything is Zoom. Everything is meetings or Microsoft Teams. There's all different ways in which things have been done from this point. Is there a way, or has there been, or a change that has been for the positive that you're seeing some kind of residual change, and is that a possibility for kind of this next generation of teachers?
It's a great question. I think there in terms of opening our minds to different possibilities, the pandemic was helpful in the sense that it allowed us to hold meetings that we, prior to the pandemic, wouldn't have even considered that we could hold them online.
Yeah.
Some concrete examples, we have parent university sessions that we run all the time, and those are
nice,
informational, interactive sessions for parents on a whole range of topics. We've been doing that for almost 20 years. We're certainly not the only ones to do that, it was a big step 5 years ago to even get someone to agree to be recorded.
Right.
And then have that recording stored somewhere.
Yeah.
On the very off chance that someone's going to go back and watch it later.
Right.
And that was a big step.
Yeah.
And the pandemic forced us to try to see, hey, can we do Zoom? Can we do a Zoom parent university?
Yeah.
And what we found was the participation went way up.
Right.
So whereas before we might have had half a dozen folks for a lot of our parent universities, we'd have 30, 40, 50, 60 tuning in. And I think it's a combination of perhaps it's less intimidating online. It fits into people's work schedules who don't have childcare or can't travel, don't have transportation, have a job that doesn't give them time off, but maybe they are working somewhere and they get on their break, they can tune in on their phone and watch the parent university. So we saw that. I think that was really, really an opportunity. We've also, and at least in our case, because we're fundamentally designed to be classroom based and in person, it was a big stretch to go online.
Yeah.
When we were forced to. It's a real testament to our staff that we were able to implement. We used Canvas as a student information system, learning management system. And in fairly short order, we were up and running.
Yeah.
The challenge, though, is as the pandemic waned, it's just everyone was so eager to come back in person and, we're back to normal. But there's always a loss that if you don't take your learning with you, your learnings about the process, then it's easy to fall back into how teaching and learning was 20 years ago.
Right.
Now, we've kept up Canvas. That's a great thing. We've kept up the parent university sessions online and other types of meetings. Our board meetings, even prior to COVID, but even more so now, are completely online, able to be viewed on YouTube. We were doing that.
Totally
we were one
accessible.
of the we were one of the first to do that in San Diego for a charter organization. And I think those are opportunities in the future. I don't know where charters end up in in 30 years from now. I think in California in particular, we're going to see a tough financial time ahead in the short term, the next 2-3 years. I think we're going to see declining enrollment across the state.
Yeah.
As the state continues to be a very, very expensive place to live, and state income taxes are really high compared to other states, some that don't have any. And so as that pool of students shrinks, the dynamic between districts and charter schools is going to change. That's my prediction. And
I couldn't agree more. I think that, it's easy when everybody's full and, that when the district school down the street has more students than they can house, then it's easier to have a charter school down the street. When that district school has declining enrollment and there are desks that are empty, and a charter school is thriving down the street, there is just an inherent conflict that comes out of that. And it's unfortunate because and this maybe go a little far afield, but part of what you don't hear in those conversations is student first language. You hear a lot of, district first language, staff first language, not what is best for the student, but how do we protect what's ours? And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I saw an interesting graphic that I'll give him a shout out. Jed Wallace.
Hey, Jed.
Hey, Jed. I'll email you this episode, Jed. You can send it out to your millions of followers.
That's right.
Because I have tens of followers. So on his very informative charter newsletter called Charter Folk, excellent resource, well worth whatever it is, $6 a month or whatever it is to get. A couple months ago, he had a graphic of and he looks at charters as a national movement, and he looked at states where the teachers union presence was strongest, and compared that to the number of, or the amount of time it took teachers to come back and start teaching in person coming out of COVID, or something like that. I'm probably messing up the graphic, but basically, essentially the idea was in the states where the teachers union was strongest, the teachers were the least likely to come back and engage and get back in to the teaching.
Yeah.
And in the states where the union presence wasn't as strong, it was different.
Interesting.
And so that's not to say that all teachers in states with unions are just don't want to come to work. That's obviously not what I'm trying to say. But it's that interesting dynamic, right, between who are we protecting, who are we serving,
right,
and really what is your why? Someone the other day stuck a sticker on my computer that said, "Know your why," and I still don't know. I still don't know who did it. I have some ideas, but it's really to reflect on that. Right? I remember when, I guess I can say his name too. He said this in public. Alan Burson, who was the former superintendent of San Diego Unified, who was an attorney and come out of the Clinton administration, and then had different jobs and was the superintendent in San Diego Unified, I think, for 6 years, if I'm not mistaken. A pretty long run for an urban school district. Right. And I remember him at a board meeting saying, "We're not an employment agency. As a district, we're not an employment agency." And he was really the one who tried to shift the orientation of the district and really put this blueprint for success. That was kind of his thing, was to try to shift the focus instructionally in classrooms, to have kind of a district-wide perspective on an approach to teaching literacy. But I remember him saying that, and it upset people. But that's the hardest thing, right? Is that you can be a charter school of 10 staff and 100 kids, and it feels very entrepreneurial, and people are doing 10 jobs and they're sleeping under their desk, and they're eating pizza for breakfast because they stayed up all night doing their lesson plans, and it's got that feeling of probably how Google was in 1998.
Right.
But then when you get big and you get established,
Yeah.
and you have multiple iterations of staff coming and leaving, and pretty soon, when people join you, and it feels like they're joining a small school district somewhere.
Right.
And that's one thing that I've tried to focus on doing a better job of, is every time we bring on a new staff member at Einstein, and I don't always have a direct hand in there in hiring, I sit down, make an appointment, sit down with them for half an hour or so. One-on-one, no agenda,
Yeah.
just to try to get to know them.
Yeah.
And see where they come from, and then to also convey that, we're different in a lot of ways. There's not a big nameless, faceless they
Right.
school district behind us. It's us. I'm part of the they. If you want to talk about they're not doing that, just come and talk to me, because that's probably something that I'm not doing.
Right.
And I think that's going to be a challenge in any of these entities as they get bigger.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The number of conversations over the last 10 years that I've had with people who charter leaders and staff that have said, start conversations. Well, no, that would never happen here. We're just a big family. And you're like, okay, well, you're right. That does work when there's 10 employees and people are sleeping under their desks because they're trying to get it off the ground. And but you go from 10 employees to 30 to 50 to, of organizations that are 300, 400, 500 staff. That's with running budgets that are 20, 30 plus $1 million. These aren't family businesses anymore, and they haven't been a family unit in a long time. And it is the growing pains of that, taking it into an organization that is maturing, and all the requirements that go into that is a challenge. And I, kind of circling all the way back around, is like, how do you do that? How do you see that kind of growth while still keeping the mentality of why, the purpose of the Charter Schools Act to begin with? And that's a stretch, and that will be a battle for years to come.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned so the Charter Schools Act was really the early proponents of it wanted charters to be kind of a proving ground for new ideas.
Sure.
And districts were supposed to collaborate with them and at least pay attention to what was going on what was innovative. But I think between competition and a very strange structure, at least in California, where you have, for those who don't know, for charters to exist as a legal entity, we have to be authorized by either a school district, which is how most of the cases are, or a county office of education. And it used to be the state board would do that, but they've gotten out of that business. So we're fundamentally being authorized by an entity that we also compete with.
Right.
And, I can say without seeming like I'm kissing up, our authorizing relationship that we have with San Diego Unified has been positive and excellent for years and years. And I look at it as a strong friendship that we always need to cultivate and keep going. And when we make mistakes, we apologize. And so they've been great, but it's kind of a fundamentally flawed structure.
Sure.
To have that
innate conflict.
Yeah. I mean, and then to ask them to come and look at what we're doing that's innovative when we don't even really know exactly what innovative means, right? We all have different ideas about what it means.
Sure.
It strikes me, I mentioned some work that I do on the WASC Commission, Western Association of Schools and Colleges, and we, the WASC, not me, the commissioners, though, we have the final vote on accreditation for about 5,200 schools around the world.
Wow.
Not just in the Western U.S. And so I have the privilege of visiting committee reports from schools in China and Japan and Korea and all over the U.S., primarily the West Coast, but a lot in Hawaii as well. And I'm struck by how similar they all are, and how much how it just seems we're moving as a herd.
Yeah.
And within that, it's really hard to find, someone will call out something as being innovative on their campus. And I'm like, I just read 10 reports that said this exact same thing, And so to try to look at different practices.
Yeah.
And then I think we're having, I don't know, maybe you have some of your clients are having this challenge, but the California data on chronic absenteeism,
Right.
which is, for the listeners, is defined in California as when a student is absent 10% or more of the days that they're enrolled in your school, they're deemed chronically absent. The chronic absentee rate in California this past year was like 21%.
Wow.
Or maybe I'm misspeaking. Maybe that's a local district that was there. But in any event, the state's very high. We're way higher than we've ever been. And then you question, is it ever coming back?
Yeah.
And then what are the kids and the families trying to convey to us?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, from just personal, my kids went to charter schools, and my youngest they're in a hybrid model. So they're at home part of the week and they're in class part of the week. And we are in the process of shifting my daughter into more of an online. It's actually not online, but it's a project based through an online program that allows her more flexibility. And because what we were seeing just as a family was getting up, going and sitting in a classroom for an hour, taking a 5-minute break, going to sitting in a classroom for an hour, wasn't doing it for her. And it was COVID and coming out of COVID and kind of reintegrating into that same model that we realized this is, there has to be some flexibility in what that looks like. And, without that, you can easily see how absenteeism is on the rise. And so maybe my question is what is it? Does it have to be a unique idea? Isn't necessarily as complex as a different way of completely different focus, but can it be just as simple as in a 5-day-a-week program where kids have a little more flexibility in their day? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think the fact that if we think about things that as adults we tend to appreciate and respect and look forward to, things like having some flexibility and choice in our day about what we do.
Yeah.
I mean, why does everyone dream of retirement? It's not just so your knees can go bad and you can sit in your rocking chair. It's so that you can do what you want to do when you want to do it.
Well, I said this to my daughter a couple of days ago. When I was in high school, I would leave my lunch in my car just so I'd have a reason to walk out to the parking lot. And what was it, 30
kids in a cell with a bell.
With a bell. That's exactly how I felt. There was this little bit of freedom. I get to control my schedule by walking out to the parking lot and getting my lunch. Like that, little things. And you realize that, that there has to be, and coming out of COVID and like what we talked about with technology and the changes and how people are becoming a little more comfortable with those kind of things, that maybe that's a great area where all education can grow and change.
And I think that I was speaking with a staff member the other day, and they said, all behavior is attempts at communication. It might not be effective, but
sure,
especially students, children, they're younger, they haven't yet learned all the social niceties that we have, where we kind of navigate around these situations perhaps a little more skillfully with a little less conflict.
Right.
But we're also maybe not as honest as kids are.
Yeah.
And so when you look at student behavior, or you look at a situation where a kid just doesn't want to come to school anymore. Yeah. Or they say they're bored, or they don't learn anything. Some of that's an exaggeration, but there's some truth in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And I've seen it again and again. When students are engaged in what they do and they love it, you don't need to worry about behavior.
Yeah.
You don't need to worry about, are they going to come?
Yeah.
Like, we've got now, and I interviewed these folks a couple months ago, but on one of our campuses, we have a boys club and a girls club. I can't remember the name of the boys club. The girls club is called Girl Up. And you better believe that those kids show up every time they have a meeting after school. They show up to weekend events, weekend trash cleanup. If you could say that a middle school kid was going to wake up at 8 a.m. on a Saturday and go and pick up trash and enjoy it,
Yeah.
it's because it's in that culture of that club and that shared ownership of something.
Yeah.
But so there's got to be that hook and that buy-in.
Yeah.
And, look, I come from a long line of teachers. I tried a few times to escape the gravitational force of this profession when I was younger. And so I have incredible respect for the work that teachers do. But I also firmly believe that we need to take a good, hard look at the profession overall. There are declining numbers of people going to graduate school to get teaching credentials. The percentage of the students, more and more it's the case that those who go into education to get teaching credentials at the university level come from the bottom third of their college classes, GPA-wise. And I will put some links into the show notes on that. I just actually came out of a meeting where we were talking about that. So where does the profession end up if we're just steaming ahead with the same approach?
Yeah.
And we're worn out and we're tired and people are quitting, or they're, what's that, COVID quitting or quiet quitting, whatever it is. Yeah. Because our kids deserve better, but maybe we need to really look again at overhauling some of this. But it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's like such a mass to try to move.
Oh, it's
just.
I mean, I don't remember what the number is. What's the state budget number in education in California? Is it 80?
What's 38% of the state budget?
Yeah,
and the state budget's trillions, right?
Yeah, it's a huge number, and that's state at a state level. That's not individual districts, and I mean these are the Los Angeles Unified with 600,000 students, and
again bigger than a lot of states,
and billions of dollars of budget. Like these are not, these are behemoths. I mean, it's like trying to turn a tanker ship. It is a very, very difficult process, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's something that my hope for, and I always say this because really the only thing that I maybe have some power over is, what our students are learning and what they can take out into the world when they leave us. And we're working on, excuse me, with my leadership team, we're working on something that I'm calling Plan 2052.
Okay.
So Plan 2052 is 30 years from now. Yeah. And I may not be around.
It's pretty crazy to think that 92 was only 30 years ago.
Exactly. 2052. But basically the concept being, and I got this in the spirit of, as a disclaimer, I was on a trip in Hawaii, a accreditation trip, and I went and I saw a presentation by a very, very old and established school in Oahu. And they said that they do all their planning based on so thinking about who's being born right now and assuming that they're good enough as an organization that those kids who are being born like today are going to grow up, go through their organization, their schools, get married, whatever, have kids, and that they're going to send their kids back to the school.
Yeah.
And so their planning's based on that. And so that's about 30 years. The average generation is somewhere between 23 and 28 years, so I was just making it a round
Yeah.
number. But that would make Albert Einstein Academies, that would be our 50th anniversary
Okay.
at that time.
Yeah.
And we can't predict what the world's going to be like at that point.
Yeah.
So I think our best bet is to try to prepare our students so that when they go out in the world, they're open and free thinking and reflective enough and creative enough that they dare to take on vested interests and try to look at things in a different way.
Yeah.
Rather than just say, you know what, it's just always been this way.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I realize that change implies loss for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you say, no, we're actually going to do this way.
Right.
If that's not managed the right way, there's deep loss and you get blowback,
Yeah.
massive blowback.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. People trying to protect their way of life. It's unfortunate, but I don't know, that's fine, but it's the students who suffer.
That's right.
Right. So it's the adults who don't want to change, and the students are the ones who suffer, and it perpetuates this kind of cycle of nothing happening different. And if nothing happens different in the next 30 years, I can't imagine where we're going to be. We're already falling behind worldwide in our education. Where are we going to be 30 years from now? That's a problem.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. I wanted to pivot a little bit,
Sure.
and talk about the work you do with nonprofit charter school boards,
Okay.
and the work you do with policies and having boards understand the requirements that they have, et cetera. And in particular, maybe a good place to start is with the Brown Act.
The Brown.
The Brown Act. And for folks who may not be aware, and I'll let Todd give it more detail, but the Brown Act is a law that governs the way that public entities conduct their business, conduct their meetings, and really, essentially, it was intended to be a sunshine provision so that the work of entities that are funded with public monies is conducted in public, in the public eye, and not in some smoke-shrouded room somewhere. So maybe you could give some context on that. That wasn't maybe the best description, and then we can take it from there.
No, I think that's good. I think that's exactly right. When you think about any public school, whether it's charter or traditional district, it is taxpayer dollars that go to fund those programs. So having an idea of where those dollars go and how they're used is essential. And I think that's fabulous. It's public funds. So yeah, so the business of, we'll just stick to the charter school, the business of the charter school, through public funds, those decisions are made in public. And so your board of directors has to sit in and there's different rules around it, but there has to be an ability for people to show up to the meeting. There has to be an ability to record it if necessary. Again, with technology, it's become much, much easier to do all of these things, to allow for the public to come and make comment on different agenda items. And so there's a lot of rules that go into that. But again, like so many things, the essence, the intent of the bill gives way to either a way to kind of police an organization in a way that isn't necessary, or to try and find fault with an organization because they didn't use the right term or word or statute in an agenda that was put out. The problem with the law is, the best part about the law is also the problem with the law. There's so many things are bright line, right? You want to put an agenda up for a board meeting, and it has to be 72 hours before. That's a bright line. 71 hours is too late, you're in violation. The reason is you want to give people reasonable notice to be able to show up to the meeting, to know what's going on at the meeting, to see if there are things that affect you, that affect the budget, that affect, whatever. There may be a student presentation. Does it get ticky-tack to say, okay, you violated the Brown Act because you posted 71 hours before instead of 72 hours? That's where kind of some of the problems. And you generally only find that when you have people who are against the organization in some way. They're trying to find fault with, whether it's a relationship with an authorizer, whether it's a community member, whether it's former staff. We're dealing with that with the school, where we've got a former staff member who is trying to find all kinds of fault with the school simply because of how they left their employment. There are a lot of small ways in which the organization can get in trouble. But fortunately, there's a lot of information there are out there now that a charter school board can really do all of the fundamentals of an open board meeting without it being a huge lift like it used to be. Posting an agenda on the website is a great way to move forward, because it used to be, you just had to physically post it. And there's still physical posting requirements, but that's more of a leftover of, bygone days when putting something on a website didn't even exist, much less make sense. There are still terms in the language related to faxing documents. I don't know who has a fax machine anymore, but the basics of the law is still solid. It's still there to protect the public, the community, the parents, guardians of students, all of it, so that the funds are being used in the proper way, and to give them a voice, simply to, and that's a great thing, right? You want your community to have a voice in your school. You want them to be able to say, yes, this is we think this is good. We don't think that is good. That is a very positive thing for the organization to work through.
Can you talk a little bit about the general guidelines that govern what boards must do in regards to public comment? So we have this question all the time, and have had it for years and years at Einstein, and I'm sure that this is pretty universal, that we'll have people come and address our board, and
Sure.
They're expecting a dialogue. They're expecting a give and take. They're expecting to be, they're probably expecting to be validated in their
Right.
in their endeavor. And in the public comment portion of the agenda, and this isn't just Einstein's board, this is everywhere that a board functions well.
San Diego Unified, across the board.
Across the board. They don't get any response other than thank you for your comments.
Correct.
So can you kind of speak to the rationale behind that?
Sure. There's a couple different pieces to that. There's public comment in general terms, and then there may be public comment on a specific agenda item. Addressing just public comment in general, it's, again, the idea being that we want the community to participate. We want them to have a voice and to be heard. There's a direct. A board can get in trouble by having a dialogue with an individual who's making public comment because of all the requirements of the Brown Act. So, for example, you have an agenda item that is talking about transportation cost. A person comes up and says during public comment, I am having issues with my own transportation, and it would be great if a bus drove by closer to my neighborhood. And a board member says, well, okay, tell us where you live. Let's look into that. Well, all of a sudden you've changed the agenda. And you can't change a board agenda in the middle of the meeting because you have all of these other requirements. You have a posting requirement. If you're creating a dialogue, it may be a wonderful dialogue and it may be an important dialogue, but you're not giving other members of the community the opportunity to engage in that same dialogue if you're changing everything in the moment. Hopefully that's not convoluted, but there are reasons why. Now, a board member, just because they're saying thank you for your comment, it doesn't mean that they're ignoring what's being said. In fact, there are times when a board might direct a staff member to look at an issue and bring it up in the next board meeting. That's a perfectly legitimate way to use that. But you can't engage in a dialogue because of all the requirements and restrictions in the agenda and the structure of the agenda that allows you to get through the business of the school in the structure that was created by the board and the school. It can certainly come up then. If something comes up in this board meeting, you can put it on an agenda for a future board meeting, but it can't be changed and engaged in that one.
Yeah, thank you for that example. I think extending from that a little bit, I always think about the fact that if a person gets up in front of the board in the public comment portion on items that are on non-agendized items, and they start talking about how they think there should be a new social studies textbook that is more focused on equity, et cetera, you invent the argument. And they're going on for their 3 minutes, and they finish, and a board member says, hey, yeah, that's a great idea. So I have a question. And then another board member says, I don't agree with that. And so we start to have that dialogue there. We end. If you're Joe Schmo, member of the public, not Joe Schmo, Joe Public, if you're Joe Public and you love talking about textbooks and you have a very strong opinion about equity in schools, and you read our agenda as it was posted on our website, you saw nothing on there about textbooks, you just missed out on an opportunity to participate in that conversation.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to convey. And I think that the hardest part is to get people to come around to understanding that when a board doesn't engage with them as if they're their friends, it's not a sign of disrespect.
Right.
But most courtrooms are that way too.
Yeah.
You don't really go and try to just make fun casual conversation with the judge either.
Right.
The lawyers don't do that either.
Right.
Maybe sometimes, only on the judge's terms, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so that's, I think, really very, very critical here in terms of for people to understand. And, what is the... If you could think about the biggest mistake or error that you see nonprofit charter school boards making, either in the aggregate or as individuals, what would you say that is?
I would probably, and I part of the problem is that because charter schools range from, they can range from a K through 6. K through 5 to a K-12 or a pre-K 12, TK-12. They're all over the map, but because they almost exclusively started as a small charter and have grown into a larger and larger charter, or they're still a small charter, it's this transition into more professional, structured behavior. It's really easy to say, like we said earlier, this is a family. This would never happen here. It's okay if we do it this way. It's always been done this way. As the charter movement grew, as it continues to grow, as an individual charter school grows, there needs to be a pretty clear understanding that regardless if you have 30 students or 3,000 students, the adherence to things like the Brown Act are across the board must be done the exact same way. And I think that gets lost sometimes. And it's not a negative. It's not for a bad way. We're just a group of people, maybe parents that came together to try and start something new, and we're doing what's best for the kids, and that's fabulous. And but there still has to be some structure to it, and that's I mean, these are still, it doesn't matter if it's 30 students, it's still public funds. They still need to be used the right way, and so it's creating early on a positive professional structure that a board can follow from day one.
And I think the extension of that too is probably for boards to really be aware of and conscious of and understand the difference between governing and managing.
Yeah.
I know certainly in the early days of charters, that line was very, very blurry.
Sure.
Right? Probably out of necessity in a lot of cases. But you'd get that same group of people together. They'd be on a governing board of some sort at the school, and they'd also be covering classes when a teacher wasn't there, and they'd be organizing the fundraising, and they would be helping out with web design.
Yeah.
Because they knew how to do that, and there was no money.
Yeah.
And then you have a situation where you have folks who are in charge of the overall fiscal and legal sustainability of the organization, and they're also they're really getting down into management tasks.
Right.
And maybe it becomes easier when you're bigger. I think I've kind of gone through that journey at Einstein.
Sure.
Where we sit now, the management job is just too big anyway for a group of volunteers to kind of sporadically want to get engaged in. It would be difficult.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I know there are a lot of examples in districts where you get school board members on on a weekend at a cocktail party, and they promise a job to somebody, and
right.
Complete violation of the Brown Act, right?
Sure. Yeah, all bad. Yeah, and a point to that is also, let's say you have 5 people on the board, and they're, especially in a younger or smaller charter, and they're friends or they're parents or they're a combination, and 3 of them are hanging out at a baseball game on a weekend. Well, you now have a quorum. You have a majority of your board, and the moment they say one thing about the organization, hey, did you hear about, we're going to get this funding, or we're looking at this, boom, that is technically a board meeting, and now you're in violation of Brown Act and others. It's taking that role seriously, and part of that too is, if David, to your point, that if they're wearing multiple hats, it's hard to sometimes take off the hat of you're a teacher and you're a board member. Well, there's the potential for you to wear the board hat in a situation where you're walking around campus in a position that says, hey, I'm part of the leadership that runs this school. That has the potential for harm as well. And board members need to be very careful of how they are seen within the community and within the school, that they can't necessarily be just somebody's buddy hanging out. They hold a powerful role for the future and viability of the organization. And that again, going back to, there has to be a professionalism, there has to be a responsibility to that they take seriously.
Yeah, I think the just while you were saying that, it just literally popped in my head, because I'm going through this where I live is like homeowners association is probably, well, not every HOA, but enough of them to make it a stereotype that you've got people who live in that community, they sit on the board of the HOA, and they can be very prone to doing things like walking by, and when you don't put your trash bins in on time, taking a photo and sending that somewhere, or noticing who has curtains of the wrong color in the building and all those things where it blurs so much, right? Or the landscaping team is there and the HOA person comes out and tells them what to do individually because they think they know.
Sure.
And so I think about that a lot because boards are, people may think that boards are boring as a concept, but boards run just about everything in America.
Yeah. Whether
for-profit or non-profit. But you can, wherever you look, you're going to run into a group of people.
Yeah.
Most of the time volunteers. So that's the fascinating part for me to just reflect on that and look at the negative examples too.
Sure.
I have two quick questions for you
absolutely.
if you've got the time, and I really appreciate you hanging out today. The first is, and I stole this concept from Tim Ferriss. So Tim Ferriss, I'm sure you're listening to this podcast. You're like, I think you and Joe Rogan are the number 1 and number 2 podcasters on earth. So I'm sure you have time to be checking this out. Imagine you have the chance to design a billboard. And this billboard will contain advice, guidance for future people who are going to drive down the freeway. It can be life guidance. It could be something related to career. What would you put on your billboard? Remember, it can't be real long. I interviewed my daughter, and her first thing was like, no. I'm like, that's like that's multiple billboards. That's like a series of billboards down the freeway. We're talking about one billboard, almost like a hashtag. What would you have as your advice for future people driving down this journey?
Yeah. It sounds, I don't want to say it this way, but I'm not sure how else to say it, but kind of do what you love. There's we're in the process. My daughters, I've got one in college and one that's almost in college. And, you start to ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, they turn to me and they say, I don't know. What do you want to be? And so there's a little bit of that. And then at the same time, it was, this multi-generational happiness research came out recently, and there was a big thing in the New York Times on it. And, what are the things that generate happiness, long-term happiness? And when I say the term "do what you love," it's not necessarily just job related. I do enjoy a lot of the things I do. There's a lot of things about the law that I don't like. There's, for all the reasons why the Brown Act can be a pain in the butt. That's all this very specifics of the law. But there's a lot of things that are awesome. There's be able to work with with charter schools that are trying something new, and you're able to get their back and push some new ideas. That's pretty cool. But you're not always going to do all the exact things, but to be able to do it with other people. So for me, do what you love is, the job is a piece of it, but it's relational. It's I love the relationship aspect of the work that I do. I always have. I've got a group of friends that I've had forever. I've got good relationships with my family. Like that to me is ultimately what the most important thing is for me. And so, that's
Great.
Where I am.
That'll fit on the billboard.
Yeah.
Thank you. You may even get some images that'll fit on there too. So
That's right.
A big heart. So thank you for that. Last is, where's your next fishing trip? Where and when?
Let's see. We're going up to, we'll be in Montana at the end of May. We're doing an extended weekend. And
Fly fishing?
Yeah, I don't know that it's going to be... The river's going to be moved. May shouldn't be too bad. The river's going to be moving pretty quick, so I don't know how well they'll be especially this year. Holy crap! Yeah, it's going to be a lot of volume of water, so we may not catch much, but it'll be the start of a good summer. Hopefully.
And that's you fish from the bank, or you because I know you also do you've been on a raft or something.
Yeah, so you've got these big, they're kind of these oblong boats with flat bottoms. They're called float boats, and we'll take a float boat down because I've got a couple buddies up there that have that. So we'll start the season by trying that, and we'll see if any of the fish comes up from the depth to even bite. But hey, it's just being out there is worth it.
Oh man, just be careful of the bears.
I know. Right about then, they're all coming out.
They're coming out,
hungry.
right? They're waking up, right?
Yes, they're skinny and hungry.
They've been fasting through the winter,
months and months.
Yeah, wow. Well, I always have to ask you that because I live vicariously through That's part of the do what you love. Right?
It is.
That's part
100%,
of it, right?
100%.
Make sure you carve out that time. Well,
yeah.
Todd, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah.
And I wish you all the best in your job, your life, your family, and your fishing endeavors.
Excellent. So, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining us for the Superintendent's Hangout. Check out the show notes for any links that we discussed in today's episode. You can also follow on Twitter at DVS1970. Thanks again for hanging out.